The ultimatum and the burning the holographic projection flickered to life in the center of Earth's Defense Command, casting an eerie blue glow across the war room. Overlord Vextai's reptilian features materialized, his four eyes gleaming with the cold satisfaction of a predator who had cornered its prey. Behind him, the massive bulk of the Dominion flagship stretched into the darkness of space, its weapon arrays pointed directly at Earth. Admiral Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the alien commander. Around her, the finest military minds of humanity watched in silence, their faces grim but determined. They had known this day would come. The Dominion Empire had consumed 12 galaxies, enslaving species after species with the same simple ultimatum that Vextai was about to deliver. Humans of Earth, the Overlord's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, translated by the universal communicators into a dozen languages simultaneously. I am Overlord Vextai, Supreme Commander of the Dominion Fleet. For 3 millennia, we have brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. We have offered the gift of submission to countless species, and they have wisely accepted. Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had studied the historical records, watched the footage of world after world surrendering without firing a shot. The Kethron had lasted for hours. The mighty Zephyrian Alliance, masters of quantum warfare, had held out for 2 days before their leaders broadcast their surrender to every inhabited world in their territory. Your species stands at a crossroads, Vextai continued, his secondary arms gesturing to holographic displays showing human colonies scattered across 47 systems. You possess technology we require, worlds we need, resources that will serve the greater good of the Dominion. We offer you the same choice we have offered all others. Submit to our rule, and your people will know peace, prosperity, and purpose under our guidance. Your leaders will retain administrative positions. Your children will receive education in the great academies of the core worlds. The transmission paused, and Chen could feel the weight of the moment settling on everyone in the room. This was it, the moment that would define the future of their entire species. However, Vextai's tone shifted, becoming colder, more threatening. Should you choose the path of resistance, we will demonstrate why that choice has never been made twice by any intelligent species. Your colonies will burn, your worlds will be reduced to cinder and ash. Your civilization will become nothing more than a cautionary tale told to other species who might consider defiance. The hologram zoomed out, showing the true scale of the Dominion fleet. Thousands of warships, each one capable of cracking a planet's surface, hung in the void around Earth's solar system. More fleets surrounded every major human settlement, a display of overwhelming force that had never failed to break the will of any species. You have 72 standard hours to broadcast your unconditional surrender, Vextai announced. After that time expires, we will begin orbital bombardment of your settlements, starting with your most populated worlds. The choice is yours, humans, wisdom, or extinction. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in absolute silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Admiral Chen turned to face her staff, her expression resolute. "Initiate protocol, Phoenix." Rising, she said quietly, "Commander Marcus Stone." The youngest officer in the room, at barely 30 years old, looked up from his tactical display with confusion. "Admiral, that protocol was theoretical. We've never actually, Marcus," Chen interrupted gently. "What do you know about the siege of Leningrad?" Stone frowned, accessing his historical databases. World War II, Earth. German forces surrounded the city for 872 days. The population, ... They chose to starve rather than surrender. And Moscow in 1812. The Russians burned their own capital to deny it to Napoleon, Stone replied, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. Chen nodded. Throughout human history, when faced with an enemy we couldn't defeat through conventional means, we've employed a simple strategy. If we can't have it, neither can they. Today, we're going to teach the Dominion Empire the true meaning of human spite. The next 18 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Across human space, the Phoenix Rising Protocol activated systems that had been built in secret for decades. Every human world, every space station, every mining operation, every research facility had been equipped with self-destruction capabilities so complete, so thorough, that nothing of value would remain for an occupying force. On New Terra, humanity's first successful terraforming project, Commander Lisa Rodriguez stood in the Central Command Center as evacuation ships launched from the surface in a continuous stream. Around her, automated systems began the methodical destruction of 2 centuries of human achievement. The atmospheric processes that had turned a dead rock into a garden world received new programming, designed to reverse their work and render the planet uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. All civilian transports clear of the gravity well, her communications officer reported. Rodriguez nodded, her hand hovering over the final activation switch. Through the viewport, she could see Dominion ships moving into orbital positions, expecting to claim a prize that would serve their empire for millennia. Instead, they would inherit poison. For Earth, she whispered, and pressed the switch. The destruction was beautiful and terrible. Carefully placed, charges turned manufacturing centers into towering infernos. Biological weapons designed for planetary defense were released into the atmosphere, creating a cocktail of pathogens that would make the world uninhabitable to most known life forms. The oceans themselves were seeded with aggressive bacteria that would consume organic matter for decades to come. Similar scenes played out across human space. Kepler Station, humanity's greatest scientific achievement, deleted its databases and collapsed its particle accelerators, creating artificial black holes that would consume the station and everything within a light-year radius. The mining worlds of the Tau Ceti system detonated their fusion reactors simultaneously, turning 3 planets into radioactive wastelands. But perhaps the most audacious destruction occurred at Proxima Research, where humanity's brightest minds have been working on experimental technologies. Dr. Elena Buscus, the station's chief scientist, made one final log entry before activating the self-destruct sequence. To whoever finds this recording, we have spent 40 years developing these technologies for the betterment of humanity. Today, we ensure they will never be used to enslave other species. The quantum entanglement communicator, the zero-point energy converter, the consciousness transfer matrix, all of it dies with us today. Some knowledge is too dangerous to be stolen. The station's destruction created a spatial anomaly that would persist for centuries, making the entire system inaccessible to conventional travel. On the bridge of his flagship, Overlord Vextai watched the systematic destruction with growing disbelief. His tactical officers provided a steady stream of reports, each one more impossible than the last. Sir, preliminary analysis shows complete atmospheric poisoning on New Terra. The ecosystem has been contaminated with biological agents that will persist for at least 800 years. Kepler Station has created multiple gravitational anomalies. The entire system is now a navigation hazard. The Tau Ceti mining worlds have been rendered completely uninhabitable. Radiation levels will remain lethal for approximately 2,000 years. Vextai's primary hands gripped the railing of his command deck. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. Species fought back with desperate last stands, with suicide attacks, with final acts of defiance. But no species had ever systematically destroyed everything they had built rather than let it fall into enemy hands. What is their economic status? He demanded. His economic advisor, a pale, multi-limbed being from the Sector 7 worlds, consulted her calculations with growing alarm. Overlord, by our projections, the human colonies we have inherited will require massive infrastructure investment to become productive. Current estimates suggest it will cost the Dominion more resources to restore these worlds than they will generate in the next 5 centuries. That's impossible, Vextai snarled. No species would bankrupt their conquerors through their own destruction. It's economically insane. But the reports kept coming. Human cargo ships, loaded with volunteers, were jumping into Dominion systems not to attack, but to die. They carried biological weapons, radioactive materials, and experimental toxins, spreading contamination through shipping lanes and military installations. Some ships simply activated their fusion drives at maximum output, creating miniature stars that would burn for decades in the middle of established trade routes. The most disturbing reports came from the fringe worlds, where other subject species of the Dominion were beginning to ask questions. The Kethron Confederacy, enslaved for 2 centuries, had begun stockpiling explosives around their industrial centers. The Zephyrian Alliance was quietly downloading their technological databases, while preparing to delete them permanently. "Sir," his communications officer reported, voice tight with concern. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Chen." Chen's image appeared on the main screen, broadcast from what appeared to be a command bunker deep beneath Earth's surface. Behind her, Chen could see human military personnel moving with calm efficiency, preparing for something that filled Vextai with cold dread. "Overlord Vextai," Chen began, her voice steady and conversational. "I wanted to personally thank you for the lesson in galactic economics. For centuries, we've wondered how the Dominion maintained control over so many species with relatively few ships. Now we understand. Your empire is built on the productivity of your subjects. You need us to work, to build, to create wealth that flows upward to your core worlds." Chen's expression hardened. "Unfortunately for you, we've decided that particular economic model no longer serves our interests. Over the past 72 hours, humanity has destroyed approximately 4 centuries worth of infrastructure development. We've poisoned our worlds, collapsed our cities, and eliminated every resource you came here to claim." She gestured to something off-screen, and the transmission expanded to show a massive holographic display tracking the systematic destruction of human civilization. Red markers indicated worlds made uninhabitable, yellow showed systems rendered too dangerous for travel, and an alarming number of sectors showed complete sterilization. "But we're not done yet," Chen continued. "You see, we've run the calculations. Every world you've conquered will now cost you more to restore than you'll recoup in taxes over the next millennium. Every dead system represents a drain on your imperial resources. Every poisoned planet is territory you'll have to patrol and defend while gaining nothing in return." Vextai realized with growing horror that she was right. The Dominion's power structure depended on the constant flow of resources from productive subject worlds. If those worlds became liabilities instead of assets, the really interesting part Chen said, her voice taking on an almost casual tone, is how quickly other species are learning from our example. My intelligence reports suggest that 17 different subject species are now implementing their own scorched earth protocols. How long can your empire survive when every conquest costs more than it gains? The transmission paused, and Chen looked directly into the camera with the cold determination that had made her humanity's youngest fleet admiral. You wanted our worlds, Overlord. Come and claim them. Claim the radioactive wasteland that used to feed billions. Claim the poisoned systems that will kill your patrol crews. Claim the economic ruin we've left behind, because we're not finished burning yet. The screen went dark, and Vextai found himself staring at his own reflection in the dead display. Around him, his command staff waited for orders, but for the first time in his military career, the Overlord had no idea what those orders should be. Below them, Earth continued its preparations for the final act of defiance, and in the distance, other human colonies burned with the cold fire of absolute spite. The price of ashes. The evacuation of Earth began at dawn on the 73rd day. Massive transport ships, their hulls blackened by the fires that had consumed humanity's outer colonies, descended through the atmosphere like mechanical angels of Exodus. They carried civilians by the millions, but not to safety to witness. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the command station orbiting Earth's moon, watching the planet that had given birth to her species prepare for its own destruction. Through the reinforced transparent alumina, she could see the blue-green marble that had been humanity's home for 300,000 years, its surface now dotted with the controlled fires of systematic demolition. Final transport is away, Commander Stone reported, his voice hoarse from 72 hours of continuous operation. All essential personnel evacuated. Phoenix Protocol is entering final phase. Chen nodded without taking her eyes off Earth. Broadcast the message to the fleet. All ships are to maintain current positions and record everything. History needs to witness this. Across human space, the evacuation ships held position at safe distances while their long-range sensors focused on the homeworld. Every human eye in the galaxy was about to witness either the birth of a legend or the death of a species. On the bridge of his flagship, Overlord Vextai received the reports with a mixture of anticipation and unease. His tactical staff had analyzed the human evacuation patterns, and the results were deeply troubling. "Sir, the evacuation ships aren't fleeing," his sensor operator reported. "They're maintaining formation at the edge of the system. It's almost like they single quotes waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Vextai demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. His question was answered by a transmission from Earth itself. The signal wasn't directed at the Dominion fleet. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in every known language, to every corner of the galaxy. When Admiral Chen's image appeared on screens across the fleet, her backdrop wasn't the sterile environment of a command center, but the burning skyline of humanity's greatest city. "People of the galaxy," Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. "Today you witness the death of Earth and the birth of an idea that no empire can conquer." Behind her, massive explosions lit the sky as humanity's greatest achievements were systematically destroyed. The International Space Elevator, a miracle of engineering that reached from the surface to orbital stations, collapsed in a cascade of fire and metal. The fusion power plants that had provided clean energy for billions went critical in carefully controlled explosions that turned night into day. For 70,000 years, species across the galaxy have faced the same choice when confronted by imperial powers: submit or die. Today, humanity chooses a third option. We choose to deny our conquerors the spoils of victory. The transmission split screen, showing similar scenes from across human space. On New Sahara, the atmospheric processes that had turned a desert world into a garden were releasing toxins that would make the planet uninhabitable for millennia. On Kepler-7, the quantum research stations were collapsing into artificial black holes that would consume everything within light years. But the most horrifying sight was the systematic poisoning of Earth's oceans. Massive underwater detonation released engineered bacteria into the water systems. Organisms designed to consume organic matter and reproduce exponentially. Within hours, the blue oceans would become toxic soup that would persist for centuries. We know other species are watching, Chen continued. Her image now broadcast from a transport ship as Earth's surface became too dangerous for human habitation. We know you've seen empires rise and fall, seen species submit to avoid extinction. But we also know that submission is just another form of slow death. The camera panned across the bridge of the transport, showing human faces of every age and ethnicity, all wearing the same expression of grim determination. These weren't the faces of a defeated people. They were the faces of individuals who had chosen their own terms for this confrontation. So we leave you this gift, Chen said, her voice growing stronger. The knowledge that an empire can be defeated not through military might, but through economic warfare. Every world the Dominion claims from us will cost them more than they can afford to hold it. Every system we've poisoned is territory they must patrol and defend while receiving nothing in return. Vextai's economic advisor had been running calculations throughout the broadcast, and her findings were catastrophic. Sir, if we proceed with occupation of human space, the resource drain will bankrupt 3 entire sectors within a decade. The cost of containment and decontamination alone exceeds our current military budget by a factor of 12. But the truly devastating news came from the intelligence reports flooding in from across the Dominion. Other subject species weren't just watching humanity's defiance, they were learning from it. Sir, his communications officer reported, voice tight with fear. We're receiving reports from the Kethron systems. They've begun implementing what they're calling Phoenix protocols across their industrial worlds. The Zephyrian Alliance has started evacuating their core research facilities. Preliminary scans suggest they're preparing for systematic destruction. 17 different species have requested detailed information about human demolition techniques. Vextai felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of conquest. Genuine fear. The mathematical reality was becoming clear. The Dominion Empire was built on the productivity of subject worlds. If those worlds became economic liabilities instead of assets, the entire imperial structure would collapse within generations. The breaking point came when Earth began its final act of defiance. The planet's rotation slowed as massive fusion. Engines, built in secret over decades, fired continuously to alter its orbital mechanics. Humanity wasn't just destroying their homeworld, they were turning it into a navigational hazard that would threaten ships for millennia to come. They're insane, Vextai, a second-in-command, whispered, staring at the tactical displays showing Earth's deteriorating orbit. No, Vextai replied quietly, they're spiteful, and spite is more dangerous than insanity because it's calculated. The final transmission from humanity came not from Admiral Chen, but from an elderly woman standing in what appeared to be the ruins of a library. Books burned around her as she spoke directly to the camera, her voice carrying the accumulated wisdom of a species that had chosen extinction over slavery. "My name is Dr. Margaret Okafor," she said simply. "I'm a historian, and I want to tell you a story about my species. Throughout our history, when faced with overwhelming force, humans have chosen to deny victory to their enemies rather than accept defeat. We burned Moscow rather than give it to Napoleon. We chose starvation in Leningrad rather than surrender to fascists. We've always understood that there are fates worse than death." Behind her, automated systems continued the systematic destruction of human civilization. Museums, libraries, hospitals, schools, everything that represented human achievement was being reduced to ash and memory. "Today, we teach the galaxy a new kind of warfare," Dr. Okafor continued, her voice remaining steady even as the ceiling began to collapse around her. "Economic warfare through absolute spite. We show you that an empire can be defeated not by destroying its ships, but by making its victories too expensive to maintain." The transmission flickered as power systems failed, but her voice continued. "To every species watching this, remember, you don't have to submit. You don't have to fight impossible battles. You just have to be willing to deny your enemies the prize they seek, even if it costs you everything." The signal died as the library collapsed, taking Dr. Okafor with it. But her message had already spread across the galaxy, transmitted by hidden relay stations and carried by refugee ships to every corner of known space. The cascade effect was immediate and devastating. Within days, the Kethron Confederacy had implemented its own version of the Phoenix Protocol, destroying 2 centuries of industrial development rather than let it serve the Dominion. The Zephyrian Alliance followed suit, collapsing their quantum research networks and poisoning their most productive worlds. But perhaps the most devastating rebellion came from an unexpected source: the Dominion's own economic data. Species that had submitted centuries ago began to quietly calculate the true cost of their enslavement. They realized that their worlds generated enough wealth to support independent governments, space fleets, and defensive networks. The only thing preventing their freedom was the assumption that resistance was impossible. Humanity had proven that assumption wrong. The end came not with a great battle, but with a simple economic report. Vextai's advisors presented him with calculations showing that the Dominion Empire, faced with system-wide Phoenix protocols, would be bankrupt within 50 years. The cost of occupying dead worlds exceeded the income from productive ones. The expense of containing rebellions outweighed the benefits of conquest. "What do you recommend?" Vextai asked, though he already knew the answer. "Immediate withdrawal from all contested systems," his economic advisor replied. "Negotiated settlements with rebel species. A complete restructuring of imperial policy from conquest-based to trade-based economics." Vextai stared out at the poisoned ruins of Earth, now a dead rock orbiting a star that would soon consume it. The humans had succeeded in making their homeworld completely worthless, while inspiring a galaxy-wide rebellion that would topple the greatest empire in galactic history. "How many humans survived?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 40 million, scattered across refugee fleets throughout the outer systems. 40 million survivors from a species that had numbered in the billions. They had literally extinct themselves to avoid slavery, and in doing so, had freed the galaxy." The Dominion Empire officially dissolved 6 months later, not through military defeat, but through economic collapse. The subject species, inspired by humanity's example, had chosen freedom over security and spite over submission. The galaxy entered a new age of independent worlds and voluntary alliances, built on the principle that some things were too precious to surrender. And in the outer systems, 40 million humans continued their journey among the stars, carrying with them the legend of a species that had chosen to burn their worlds rather than kneel. They became teachers, advisors, and consultants to other species, learning to resist oppression. Their children grew up hearing the story of Earth's final day, when an entire species proved that freedom was worth more than life itself. The lesson humanity taught the galaxy was simple. Empires depend on the compliance of their subjects. When that compliance becomes too expensive to maintain, even the mightiest empire will fall to the power of coordinated, calculated spite. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't achieved through superior weapons or tactical brilliance, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the best way to win is to make sure your enemy's victory costs more than they can afford to pay.